This is a podcast about music if you really love music. Let's begin. Welcome to In a State.
I'm in a state, I'm in a state, I'm in a state, oh yeah.
In a State.
This is Porter Block in New York City. Welcome to In a State Podcast. Today I have the great pleasure of welcoming singer Addi McDaniels to discuss her musical pursuits, past and present, her debut solo record, After the News, which has just been released. Addi's voice has been called a powerhouse and brass-plated, describing a very carefully constructed musical instrument, which it is. But in order to do what she does and do it so effortlessly and with such consistently great results, I'm guessing her technique is only part of the equation. Addi's one of those singers who truly inhabits the content of her characters and her performances, and that's the mark of a great singer. She can sing and emote all kinds of music, a lot of which is contained on this record: traditional folk, pop, standard jazz, Afro-Cuban, blues, Americana, show tunes, cabaret. Prior to this release, she was part of an innovative duo called Addi and Jackie, which consisted solely of her voice and the incredible harp playing of Jackie Carrad. The duo released 3 records, all of them pretty much transformative works in terms of music, arrangements, and production, and probably unlike anything you're going to hear on Top 40 radio. The duo performed in venues as varied and storied as Carnegie Hall and the Apollo Theater, and got a great deal of attention. But now she's got her first solo release. Addi McDaniels, welcome to In a State Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. That was such a kind and lovely intro.
You grew up in Florida in a very musical household. I know this sounds simplistic, but is there something that you can remember, or someone who you heard that gave you the idea that you could stand up and sing in front of an audience?
Yeah, I feel very lucky to have grown up with parents who had a pretty fantastic musical taste, in my opinion. It was quite customary to have a range of anywhere from Tom Waits, Joni Mitchell, Leonard Cohen, Bruce Cockburn. A lot of these voices I grew up hearing from a very, very early age, and I'm very grateful for that because I think it had a huge role in the way I kind of interpret music, and I just so respect and appreciate their writing styles.
Let me stop
voices.
you right there. As a parent, I just want to say thank you. That's a wonderful thing to say. And a number of guests I've talked to specifically talk about rating their parents' CD. I guess it was CDs. You're quite a young person. You know, they got it, all this stuff that they wouldn't otherwise have gotten their hands on, and it colored their tastes. In an interview, you described yourself as an old soul, which I find very sad because you're very young, and that singing is, quote, a search for answers of some kind of truth. Singing helps channel pain and hurt into transformative works of beauty, end quote. You have lots of range of things that you can do with your voice. How did you kind of find the way to each one of those sounds?
I think a good guess, because I'm not really sure, but I would say I can recall loving imitation. I used to love to imitate other singers, so I would put on a record and try to emulate and really just nail whatever it is they were doing, you know. So I just love that, and I'm sure that that definitely comes into play here. To the old soul piece, I would say that I think from the age of 8 or 9, I recently found some journals where I was writing really like heartbreaking, tragic poems about heartbreak. So I don't know what that is. You know, I believe in past lives of some sort. So maybe there was, you know, something going on there. But I did kind of come into the world, I think, with a bit of that heaviness or something.
You went to Performing Arts High School, and you've done theater. You've done Off-Broadway, Fantastics. I saw a bunch of musical theater that you did. that must have had some sort of impact, at least on the way your approach and your technique.
Of course, absolutely. Yeah, I was also acting and performing, from high school. It started to really sink in that I loved taking on another person's point of view, exploring that, and I think that translates really well in a lot of cases to music. And so I really enjoy interpreting a point of view and a story, a narrative, and making it my own and trying to really embody what that experience is like, or what that's like.
You covered House of the Rising Sun with Addi and Jackie. Most know the Animals version, or Dylan. There was a great Lead Belly recording and Woody Guthrie, but actually the melody dates back, I think, over 400 years. There's no real writer to that song. Thanks to the work of Alan Lomax and others, there have been recordings really since the 1920s. You open that song a cappella with a very guttural, almost gut bucket moan, I want to say. Did that come out of improvisation? Was that a production and arrangement choice that the two of you made? Was someone else in the room who said, you got to make this sound,
No, it was the two of us. We did do some digging into the history of the song itself and tried to figure out what the origin was, and exactly as you just described, figured out that the roots were pretty ancient and went back really far. So that was, I think, a good jumping entry point for us.
My mother, she was a tailor. She sewed my new blue jeans. And my father, he was a gambling man down in New Orleans.
Less Likely Places, A Craigslist Story is another Addi and Jackie song and album, which seems to take its lyrical content from a Craigslist post made by a single woman in Arizona, and you guys developed it into a full-on album with that as its broad theme, which is pretty ambitious. How did that come about, the recording, the writing? Did you record it live?
The initial version was a studio recording, so that was the very first song we ever wrote together. And it sort of blossomed into this beautiful collection of songs, and we then decided to record them in a studio. We did later make a live recording that includes that song, but it was the most organic, very special writing process that I've been a part of. It was really the beginning of my own experience writing songs in collaboration with Jackie. It was really special.
Your songwriting with Jackie, what was that like? That was new for you.
Yeah, that's really where it all started. It was a big catalyst, and kind of embarking on really taking ownership of that. I think, as you just said, I was definitely toying with the idea. I think we both were for a long time, and had developed a friendship working in the Fantastics together, and kind of expressed that we both wanted to write our own stuff, and that's kind of how that was born.
You covered Elmore James, a song called Dark and Dreary, which I love. It's one of my all-time favorites, in an all-star recording tribute called Strange Angels in Flight with Elmore James. And the kind of atmosphere on that track reminds me a little bit of this new record. We'll talk about that. Acoustic guitar, stand-up bass, violin. It's almost a sort of Depression-era arrangement. And it's great. The violin alternating against your vocal, which works perfectly. Tom Jones is on that record, Kev Moe, Shelby Lynn. How did that all come about? That sounds like a pretty interesting project to be involved in.
Yeah, that was an incredible experience. That was my first collaboration with Tom Searing and Marco Giovino, who produced the record. So they had.
I didn't even know that. So you see, I was right. That, sort of
that was the beginning, and then they had asked me to be a part of this upcoming album, After the News.
All right, so let's talk about After the News. This is a new record. It was just released. Most of the songs are written by Tom Searing, who you just mentioned, and that's very interesting to me. What was the artist and repertoire process? I mean, being now a songwriter and a singer, did you kind of raid his catalog and say, oh, this one, I want this one and that one, or did you go through a kind of discussion of what you wanted to say, and then started to create the songs? How did that all come about?
Yeah, it's a good question. There were quite a few to choose from, and so the three of us, Tom, Marco, and myself, put together, kind of curated this list that seemed like thematically lived in the same world and kind of explored these themes of loss, and were a lot of them centered around a personal loss and experience that Tom had experienced, and so we just were looking for songs that aligned in that way. We actually recorded, it was in several sessions, but we did get, I think it was half the songs were recorded all together, so it was live, and that was an experience I'd never had before, kind of doing just a few takes, and we're just really capturing this sense of spontaneity and this kind of life that was new to me, and it was incredibly exciting. And
you chose a song by Andrew Bird, which happens to be the single in the video, Are You Serious? For people who don't know, he was a member of the Squirrel Nut Zippers. He's a pretty prolific writer. Why that song, and why Andrew Bird?
My sister turned me on to Andrew Bird many years ago. I've been a huge fan forever. And at the time we were recording this album, I don't know. I sort of had this very strong sense that this is one of the tunes we should be including. And I think, as you had mentioned, kind of capturing that world or that sound of what we had recorded on the Elmore James recording. That it was just so fun to kind of play in that with some of those colors, and it would seem like the right fit. I'm such a fan. I love him.
You also talk a little bit about "Sorry," which is I think a little bit maybe more accessible from a pop perspective. Talk about that song.
Sure. Similarly, I think at the time I was going through a breakup. It's a little cliche, but it certainly felt like the narrative in the song, particularly, felt very vivid to me. These images of sort of showing up at someone's house. Why am I here? What am I doing here? This sort of feeling of wandering and trying to process just this person no longer being part of your life. So it was very, very therapeutic in that way.
I was sorry. Would it matter if I said I was sorry?
I saw maybe on Instagram that you were rehearsing for you're going to be doing a showcase gig. In the rehearsal, it was an acoustic guitar, it was a djembe. Any thoughts on how you're going to present this stuff live?
Yeah, we're exploring a sort of pared down arrangement. We were invited to perform it in the City Winery Cellar Sessions, and so we got for that specifically, they needed a very pared down setup. So while we had previously obviously on the record and we'd performed with a more extensive setup and lots of electric guitars, this was an acoustic set, and it seemed to really fit the kind of tone, and it was a fun way to let these songs kind of take a new shape, and it's been really fun exploring that. So I think that we will continue to perform in that configuration.
I think you added a mandolin. I heard you wanted to play mandolin.
Yes. Oh gosh, yes.
Just make sure you try to write everything in G or D, otherwise you're fucked. Do you write on piano, guitar? How do you kind of approach writing your own songs?
Yeah, both. Unfortunately, I don't play any instrument well enough, or at least not yet, to feel comfortable doing it live in front of people. So at this point, because I have a basic understanding of piano and guitar, I use them both to kind of construct basic form, and the lyric writing obviously is easier in that regard.
But oh baby, we were so wrong, and we were not prepared for the city of Havana.
I think I just wanted to say one thing to speaking to, you'd mentioned a few times just sort of how sad you feel about the kind of tone on the record and how it really does kind of explore this darkness. I know there's these quotes of speaking to that, but I really sincerely feel like this was a gift to be able to take on a point of view of somebody later in life and kind of look back. It's not often that you get an opportunity to really sit with those questions, really like let them sink in, like, oh, we're all going to die, you know, like people that you love are going to die. And I find that just so compelling and powerful in how it informs how you live your life now. And I just really feel like it was a blessing. And while it may have been intimidating at the beginning, I really just feel deeply grateful to have explored that at this time in my life.
Addi McDaniel is way too young to be speaking in such existential terms, but I got to admit, she really does put you through the ringer on this record. So many different styles are covered, but the emotional center is kept. So bravo to her, and I want to thank her for coming out onto In a State podcast. This is Porter Block podcasting from New York City. You can listen to my music on any streaming service you prefer. And thanks for listening. We love when you do. Please comment on inastatepodcast.com or Facebook or any place that you listen. I'd love to hear from you. And if you're listening to this, you're in a state.